We're at a critical point in the Zenless story where many moving parts are starting to come together, but there are some pretty huge things that go unanswered or are even forgotten by most. Recently, I've been making a lot of Zenless content. With more than 500 hours played, you can say that I like the game. That said, I wanted to make a video about how I think some parts of the story are related, something like a master theory. I also wanted to do this before Lucia's release because I'm almost positive she's going to bring up a huge lore dump about ethereals and hollows, and I want to see if this lines up with anything that she reveals. Now, this is going to involve the whole timeline, so I'll give you a quick refresher on the history and events from Old Civ until now, but there will be spoilers for the story up until 2.2. But a quick disclaimer, I do not work under the thought that this is tied to Honkaiverse stuff. Sure, same company, branch in the imaginary tree, whatever. But it's not really fun for me or interesting to say, it's a Honkai thing, womp womp, and justify all the weird stuff happening. They've said it's not related, so I'm keeping everything based on what we know and can gather from the Zenless story and its related content. So firstly, we've got the old civilization. It's ancient and has super advanced tech, but they also started the Hollow disaster. Whoopsie. Lots of the tech used in New Eridu and the story is based on old Civ tech or is repurposed old Civ stuff, especially if it's more advanced. Great examples are both Billy and Qingyi being old Civ robots and the HDD being repurposed old Civ technology. The only people really making heads or tails of most of the old Civ tech right now are the White Star Institute scientists. There are ruins around where stuff gets salvaged now and then, but we don't really have much more than that. The Eridu period is the restart of recorded history. Old Civ stuff was mostly lost, so when humanity came together to make Eridu, people started keeping records again. This is when all the cool stuff happened, like the foundation of the Void Hunters and all of their crazy feats. Arguably, we would have still been in the Eridu period if not for the fall of the old capital. 11 years before the story. This starts the new Eridu period and puts the story in motion for the Proxies. Inside Helios Academy, there was an altercation that caused Hollow Zero to grow super quick, and the government pretty much blew up half the city to save the other half. That's why there's a big menacing pit called the Chasm. Sweet, now we've gone through the overview. It's time to start plugging stuff in and seeing where puzzle pieces fit. Zenless does a great job at world building and leaving stuff to interpretation, but it can get a bit heavy-handed. So for the old Civ, we know they were super advanced. Of the super advanced tech we've seen in the story, there are a few examples that stand out which are likely derivative of or are repurposed old Civ tech. Those being intelligent constructs, cloning, genetic modification, the HDD, and the craziest of them all, consciousness transfer / uploading. That last one is a real doozy that makes nearly anything possible from a character standpoint. So as the story progresses, we've gotta keep an eye on it. We look and we see the funny tail screaming curse words, but it is way bigger than just Magus. Outside of that, we can only really say they were crazy advanced and eventually died out. Skill issue? Maybe. The Eridu period is where things get interesting. Everyone loves the original Void Hunters from the lore teaser, and they're all from here. And probably dead. The Eridu period was easily over 100 years ago. The wiki lists it as starting about 140 years ago, but I think it's way more than that. And the foundation of the Void Hunters was probably around the start or middle of the Eridu period. If we take those things into account, the Void Hunters that are limited by mortality are likely all gone. We know Miyabi's family was from Swordmaster, but we don't really know much about the rest of them. The Void Hunter title in itself is interesting too. It's not really a power scaling thing. A lot of the time, the Void Hunters and adjacent are very strong, but it's more of a political award. You just need to contribute a ton to humanity in a time of need. Like how Nobel Prize winners are Nobel laureates. Miyabi soloed a whole hollow in under 5 minutes. Ishwan is Superman, woman. But we know of the originals, Joyous was a proxy/investigator, and Arche founded Helios. Both a little bit more on the brainy side. So here is my first thought. I think Phaethon is a title from the Eridu era. Now, why is that? I'll explain where this idea came from later, but for now, we know Eridu is likely named after the river Eridanus, where Phaethon fell in the myth. If we take this a step further, there'd likely be an impact crater where this Phaethon fell. And given that Eridu was built around Hollow Zero, it would just make sense. I see this happening in one of two ways. The original Phaethon tried to harness ether or power from the Hollows and failed, making Hollow Zero in the process. Or the original Phaethon was a champion of humanity that stood against a threat from the moon, taking it down with them, making Hollow Zero. Now, in those two options, they share one thing. Phaethon overstretched themselves for the sake of humanity and paid the price, just like the myth. This one just has a bit of a nuclear fallout twist, but they also provide the next step for humanity to move forward. Either way, solid chance OG Phaethon is the creator. Creator of Hollow Zero, inadvertently creator of Eridu. In some way, I'd expect them to know more about Ether and the Hollows than anyone else, or is in some way corrupted by whatever they messed with in the fall. Now, I know the Mayflower family founded Eridu, but that's on paper. They could have come around after the fallout, or the original Mayflower could have been this Phaethon. I don't think there's enough info to explore that one way or the other though. This section is where we can also plug in another theory I really liked from our Discord from Shishiro, also known as Astolfo in the stream community. They bring up the interesting point of New Eridu not having an actual military and just a defense force. If we relate this to how things are handled in our world, it could be that top-level government interference would be the cause for that shrinking in scale. And with spaces like Tops having such heavy influence by the Exaltus, it would make sense that they infiltrated the government during the founding and kneecapped efforts to subdue or eliminate Hollows. This is only scratching the surface of a super in-depth description, so I will also have it on screen for you to read. So let's say people know of the fall, or have a better understanding of the events and nature of Hollows. Safe to say they splinter into things like research groups and cults. With the foundation of Eridu allowing for safe observation and research of the Hollows, people can take time learning about them, or worshipping them. Now onto the Void Hunters, and there's only a few assumptions I'll make here. So I'll toss an airball. Arche is old Civ. So why do I think that? What actual dude could have a head of fire? Only an intelligent construct would be able to have a head of fire, and with the old Civ having consciousness transfer, they could be a holdout from the original disaster that is looking to better understand the fallout. It also makes sense for them to jump into Hollow Zero looking for the creator if he's got enough know-how about Hollows and navigating them. Since Helios made or refined the HDD, it wouldn't surprise me if Arche had their own version. If this is the case, decent chance Arche also knew the original Phaethon and wants to find them for whatever reason. Oh, Sunbringer. The only other one I have a real point for because she's the original head of Marcel Group and the creator of Bang Boo. Now, there have been Sunbringer crumbs here and there, especially after Seed's Trust event referencing her. I don't think she's around in the same capacity and probably uploaded herself into a Bang Boo. That way, she'd have full control of her body and the modularity of it, as well as leading any Bang Boo troop around. Could this have been similarly done for the other Void Hunters? Possibly, but the tech is still incomplete even in the modern day. She was likely one of the very few, if any, from the Eridu period capable of even taking the risk. You know, because she was probably super rich for making Bang Boo. With those out of the way, we reach the modern day. The fall of the old capital. With what went down in 2.2, we learn Carol Arna willingly went with the Exaltus because she also has some gold in Hollow Zero, likely searching for Arche. She absolutely knows more than she lets on, but also trusts in her Phaethon to find her eventually. Aside from the myth, a literal definition of Phaethon is the Shining. so it could be a different interpretation of the same name. Carol's involvement with the Exaltists isn't entirely voluntary, but there was some familiarity there. Before we dive deeper into that and into Helios being sus, there's another very good theory from our Discord. Cookie mentioned Carol being based off the Minotaur in the Labyrinth and Ariande's thread. Now, expanding on this, Ariande's thread is also a way of describing a method of solving complex puzzles by leaving a trail to backtrack from. Could Carol have left a trail in her messages or somewhere else? Very likely, given that she seems themed after the Minotaur and knowing that the Proxies are pretty much geniuses. Now we're gonna backtrack a little bit to talk about Helios and the stuff from there. From the lore teaser, we hear a hacker and their robotic sounding companion hacking into the Internet network using Fairy and the other AI. First, it seems like the password to access the super classified files is the myth of Phaethon. When you take a look, they're shown in the same way as the access granted. This is what makes it seem that the myth of Phaethon and Phaethon themselves is far more important than just a name that Carol gave the Proxies. The info about the Void Hunters is all under this super classified section, but there's listed information about different factions and institutions, and the hacker says,
"Wow, that's a lot of key terms, even ones on us."
Of the listed stuff on screen, I think it's pretty safe to say we can narrow it down to either White Star or Helios Academy, given how good they are with tech and how they're handling the AI. The hacker also tells the AI to stay dormant until someone can awaken them, uploading them to the depths of Internet till then. We know Fairy ended up on a USB and got plugged into EOS when the Proxy was piloting them, so we're still missing the others. So this person also understands the hidden parts of the AI, meaning there's more to Fairy and the others since there are specifics to awakening them. Why could the Proxies immediately link with Fairy? No problem then. Well, this isn't just some King Arthur story, it's pretty likely because of the HDD and how the Proxies' eyes work. See, both Proxies have eye implants that let them link to the HDD and EOS. The reason they can still communicate inside hollows, unlike other tech in the world, is because the HDD turns their brain into a simulated mini hollow, allowing the connection frequency to line up with actual hollows. So why is this important? Well, there's another piece of tech that is stated to work the same way, which is Miyabi's sword. The Proxy gets their hands on it for a bit and really quickly realizes that it's using a simulated mini hollow to trap Tailless inside. And there's a key bit of information. Tailless is some weird ether beast, it's sentient and everything. Not gonna go too deep into that, but we can see that Yixuan's Qingming bird is very likely similar, with it living inside or being tethered to the gore that she has on her back. These ether-based creatures, or ether beasts, can exist outside of the hollows because they're linked to a much smaller, portable hollow. They're also both incredibly strong and enable their partners to do superhuman stuff. Except for Miyabi most of the time because she's actually just built different. I think you see where I'm going with this already. Fairy is probably an artificial version of an ether beast, operating within the Proxy's HDD as well as their brain when they're connected. This would explain how it's capable of the crazy calculations and data collection necessary to map out hollows in real time, as well as hack technology near the Proxy. With enough energy, Fairy can use the computational power of almost all the tech in New Eridu for processing things. So sweet, the Proxy's got a legendary Pokemon too. What does that mean? Well, what if Fairy is one step towards not just a playable Proxy, but to control of the hollows? We see in the lore teaser that there are 4 AI, including Fairy. We know that Fairy's main function is hollow mapping, and we see the hacker ask Fairy to search for things in the database during the teaser. I think each of the AI have a specific primary function, and when put together, they enable their host to manipulate ether or hollows on a grand scale. Based on the trailer, my guesses for the AI functionality are something like Fairy locates, Yokai distorts or changes, Ginny transports or moves, and Ghost breaks. If we think about all those externally, it'd be like the 6 eyes for ether, being able to see the movement of every particle and change it at will or break the flow of ether if necessary. On top of this, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a master AI that manifests when all 4 are present in a suitable multiple hosts. Either they combine or one is summoned. That would be the force that allows the proxy or host to do all the crazy stuff. So aside from the AI and all the powers it can have with ether manipulation, would there be anything similar we can compare it to? Yes! This came recently with how Seed's backstory was handled, and it opens up a lot more suspicion around Helios itself. We know Seed was found in the Hollows as a young kid and had no signs of ether corruption despite being in there for weeks. She grew up but had incidents around technology, which happened again in her agent story. We also see Seed Senior's targeting identify her as a massive threat for extermination. But she was just a little kid, so what the hell's that about? Well, it seems like Seed is a technomancer or something along those lines. She can blow up electronics when she loses control emotionally. If we think back, we also saw the Proxies do something crazy when they were emotionally unstable. At the end of her story too, Seed also mentions that she marked the location she escaped to with Helios, and that she is from Helios Academy herself. She never really specifies that she lived there or attended as a student, but that she escaped and marked the place as Helios. So what's going on there? There's one more thing Seed shares with the Proxies which is glossed over a little bit, and that's her ether aptitude. Now, don't the Proxies have bunk ether aptitude? No, actually. The HDD uses so much processing power in their brain that it kneecaps their otherwise insane ether aptitude, especially with how quickly they pick up Ishwan's techniques. Seed was able to sit in a hollow for weeks with no side effects, but also distinctly does not have tech like the HDD occupying her brain. From these similarities, it's a solid bet that Seed is some kind of test tube baby or child experiment from Helios to make ether-resistant people or elements implanted people. If the Proxies are ether, then Seed is electric. There's a solid chance we'll see people with the other elements in the future, but also, there's a chance that taking in more of the AI gives the Proxy the ability to control those elements. If ether is the combination of them all, then each AI up until then would have a lesser element, working into the Proxy getting their ether attribute with all 4 or 5. So if the Proxies are the big win with the whole experiment and can do crazy stuff, it would make sense why Carol Arna called them Phaethon. Knowing full well the history of Eridu and likely more secrets than we can even guess at, the name fits the next shining one to make a big change for the sake of humanity. So what comes next? The creator? The moon? Sacrifice Perlman as a playable character? Honestly, outside of the Throne Quarter happening soon, it's a lot of grasping at straws. What I do think though is that the playable Proxy makes sense in the lore, and Helios Academy has a darkness we do not know about just yet. As we learn more about their tech, Arche, and the relation to the old civilization, we'll be able to make some better guesses as to whether the Proxies are strong Doge or weak Doge, especially with stuff like uploading your consciousness in play. There are a lot of shenanigans that devs can get up to for future parts of the story. I'd also like to know what you think about this theory/theories, if there's anything you would add or think doesn't fit, or if you agree or disagree. If you did enjoy the Yap session, I'll turn the iPad around now and ask you to like and subscribe, as it genuinely does help a ton. But as always, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and week, and I will see you next time.